Cops. Think what you will, but they are the first ones you call when the neighbor starts selling Labubus out of his garage. Drugs are fine, but this is too much. When things feel chaotic, we want law and order. But does law and order make a place richer, I wonder? Today we're looking at the cost of crime and how police can change a country's future. Starting with the price of chaos. You can't talk about policing yourself to prosperity without talking about this guy, Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's founding prime minister. He led the country to what many consider the single biggest transformation in Southeast Asian history. From an extremely poor, mismanaged British colony into the country with the largest GDP per capita in terms of purchasing power parity. And a main component of this transformation was, you guessed it, cops. This is obviously oversimplifying it, but a major part of Singapore's transformation was the effective use of law enforcement. In 1965, Singapore was in bad shape. It was so bad that here's Lee Kuan Yew crying on national television. At this time, GDP per capita was around $428, and police corruption was the norm. Yeesh. And after the British military left them in 1968, things were looking pretty grim. Government revenue was dropping sharply, and they didn't have any oil or land to sell. Picture Singapore as your uncle who's falling into hard times and is constantly asking you to post his stuff in Facebook Marketplace. No, Uncle Julio, no one's DMing me about the boat. So how do you fix a broken country? Well, with money, of course. LKY made it his mission to make Singapore financially healthy, from the individual all the way up to the collective. He famously implemented a forced savings account to ensure that his constituents remained solvent. Each citizen was then made to use these savings to purchase housing. But Jose, what does this have to do with cops? Well, officer, if citizens have equity in their home and money in the bank, there's less financial incentive for crime. But let's be real. Without a strong, trustworthy government, these mandatory savings and these higher government salaries would be eaten away by corruption. So LKY proceeded to obliterate corruption from the Singaporean government. He became famous for being the most anti-corruption leader in Southeast Asia, maybe even the world. And this is where cops came in. Oh yeah! Well, actually, regular cops in this case were part of the problem, with the rampant bribing and all. Oh! So LKY created the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. Cops for cops, if you will. And they were ruthless. For starters, if they thought a government official had one Lambo too many, they assumed the fourth Lambo was a bribe. And maybe he thinks, who cares? They'll have to prove it in court, and I'll just bribe the judge. Innocent until proven guilty and all. Well, no. If the CPIB thought you were taking bribes, you'd have to prove that you bought that fourth Lambo after your legitimate toy business took off. You don't understand. People are going crazy for these. Yeah, right, these things. You're coming with us, chump. Oh no. Also, if the amount of the bribe was confirmed, the perpetrator had to pay back the amount in full. Needless to say, LKY was running on a tight ship. Even Q's Minister of Development was accused of accepting $1 million in bribes. The police were bold. Some might say even tyrannical. But it worked. Singapore became one of the safest, least corrupt places on earth. And then became, I'm sure coincidentally, one of the richest places on earth. Who knows, maybe eliminating corruption, making sure your citizens are liquid, having a clear path to home ownership, and providing world-class education might all be good ideas. Which brings us to our larger point. When you look at any GDP per capita list and sort it by perceived safety, as one does on a random Saturday morning, you can surmise that maybe order is a foundation for wealth. And strong, trustworthy law enforcement is a foundation for order. Let's look at Japan, land of the rising sun. And Pikachu. For years, it has consistently ranked as one of the safest countries in the world. Sushi tastes better when you're not at gunpoint, and is also pretty rich. But how do they do it? Well, again, a big part of it is trustworthy law enforcement. The Japanese didn't just build police stations, they built kabans. There are about 6,000 of these approachable little structures everywhere in Japan, and they help enforce the high trust society Japan has built over the years. Imagine you lost your wallet. Someone tells you to go to this tiny little cop house to see if they've seen it. You make your way there thinking about all the cash you left in that wallet, 100% sure you're never gonna see it again. And lo and behold, $2 whole dollars lay intact. In 2023 alone, people handed around $29 million of lost goods over to the Tokyo police. So that's what a high trust society looks like. Just so happens that Japan is also one of the richest countries in the world. Again, correlation is not causation, but you can see a trend. Good law enforcement, rich country. Let's look at a few more case studies in case you don't believe. Switzerland, the world's vault, where they literally drilled the vaults into the Alps. That's just a James Bond plot point waiting to happen. To become the world's bank, Switzerland had to convince the other country elites that their money was safer in Switzerland than in their home country. So Switzerland drills vaults into the Alps. They also pay their police handsomely, and they promote this culture of financial safety. In Zurich, the average police officer earns around $110,000 annually, nearly double the global average. This deters corruption and helps the rich people who keep their money there sleep at night, knowing they have a trustworthy institution to keep their money safe. And they also have the covenant mammoth with its commanding scream, protecting the mountains. Okay, simple enough. Pay your cops twice the global average and you have a safe city. But what about places that pay a little bit less but are still very safe? Enter Denmark. A Danish cop makes around $70,000, which is a middle class salary in Denmark. Denmark is pretty rich. But how do they keep the order? Well, the thing is that Denmark citizens are so trustworthy that they hardly need policing. It's common to see baby strollers outside of establishments with babies in them, sleeping, while their parents are in there actually having fun. So how did the Danes achieve this high trust society? Well, with blood. You'd think a strong safety net is the reason why Denmark has low crime. And sure, that helps. But what you may not know is that Denmark had its own Lee Kuan Yew in the 1600s, King Frederick III. Before 1660, Denmark was wild. The nobles ran the show. They stole tax money, and they had the king in the palm of their hand. King Frederick III said, "No more." He launched a coup against the nobles, declared himself absolute monarch, and instituted the King's Law, Kongloven. The king gave his new civil servants good salaries and guaranteed pensions. A huge deal back then. By the time Denmark became a democracy in 1849, the culture of incorruptibility was beaten into the system by autocrats, long before voters had a say. It started with high fear of the king, which developed into high trust once the corruption was gone. Order is a foundation for wealth, and here's the payoff. A rich society that can afford to take care of its people. Straight out of a snow globe. But wait, what if you wanted to turn a country around in the age of the internet? Surely things are different now. Surely you can't run the same playbook that Denmark or Singapore did, right? Right? Let's talk about El Salvador. I know, spicy topic, but bear with me. This nation was transformed from the murder capital of the world with a recorded 105 homicides per 100,000 people into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere with 1.9 homicides per 100,000 people. So it's worth a look in this video. And if you're vaguely familiar with the story, you know that at the center of this transformation was this guy, Nayib Bukele. He incarcerated 2% of the adult population, incapacitating every major criminal network in one fell swoop. But what I want to focus on is the financial implications of this, because there's a curious story here that helps support the thesis of this video. So when Bukele was planning this mass incarceration, he consulted a few economic advisors, and their advice was that he should brace himself for a serious economic shock. They argued that even if money exchanged hands in the criminal underworld, that money was bubbling up to the real economy. Those dollars still made their way up in the form of consumer purchases. And Bukele goes, damn. Well, I'll do it anyway, these guys are bad news. And Bukele braced himself for the inevitable economic hit. But it never came. Instead, GDP grew. And this year, the IMF states that El Salvador is on track for 4% GDP growth. And that the outlook for next year is, quote, very good. So do cops make a place richer? Well, yeah. But unsurprisingly, it's complicated. Law and order is a foundation for wealth. Arguably the most important. If law enforcement is empowered to support a fair and organized system, then yes, cops will make a place richer. But if law enforcement is underpowered, or worse, a participant in undermining law and order, then future prosperity is in question. And stamping out corruption is no easy task. For every leader who has established order, bent nobles to the well, or dismantled criminal networks, there are countless others who have died trying. But as we've seen here, with tremendous will, it can be done. Which reminds me, let's check in on Singapore. What are they doing these days when it comes to law enforcement? Oh, that cop's a robot. Apparently it detects undesirable social behaviors, like a congregation of more than 5 people? That's a bit creepy, but anything to increase that GDP, am I right? Thank you for watching, and if you like this one, maybe you like this one too. Yeah, go ahead. I'm not stopping you, and neither is that robot. Yet.